Good morning and greetings from Latvia. I am Zana Greenwald, and it's my pleasure to welcome you at the last webinar in the series Fostering Peaceful and Resilient Communities through Museums and Libraries. These webinars are organized by Latvian Museum Association, the Latvian Librarians Association, and the Latvian National Commission for UNESCO. In the previous webinars, we explored the peace aspects of sustainable development. We looked closer into the peace, justice, and strong institutions, the goal 16 of the Agenda 2030. We learned about practical examples and case studies about peace building through museums and libraries. Today's webinar title is Navigation of Peace Building in Times of Conflict. In this session, the focus will be on the power of language and communication as both barriers and gateways to building, understanding, and strengthening community. The webinar will be moderated by Diana Walters, who works as facilitator, researcher, prison chaplain, and activist for peace and social justice. Based in the UK, Diana has over 35 years of experience in heritage and peace building. She has worked in over 20 countries, including the former Yugoslavia, East Africa, Israel, Palestine, the former Soviet Union, and Southeast Asia. And today, Diana has invited one of her longest collaboration partners as guest speakers. We are very happy and thankful to have with us Aida Vežic, Secretary General of the Balkan Museum Network. In the discussion part, we will also have joining Henry McGhie, moderator of the first webinars in the series. Henry runs the museum consultancy Curating Tomorrow, working to empower museums and similar institutions to contribute sustainable development agendas. Before I pass floor to Diana, I would like to thank our fantastic moderators for the meaningful webinars that we have had opportunity to attend this autumn. Also, big thank to our collaboration partners of this project, Museums and Libraries Association in Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, Moldova, Georgia, and Ukraine. Thanks to you, we have been able to tackle this very complex question of peace and peace building in our region. We hope that our community-organized conference in this May, as well as the webinar series, will serve as thought-provoking and encouraging source for our colleagues, including outside the partnership. And now, it's my pleasure to pass the floor to Diana Walters. Please, Diana.
Thank you so much, Zane. What a wonderful introduction. Hello, greetings everybody to wherever you are around the world. And I sincerely hope that wherever it is that you're joining us from, that you are joining us in good health and with a relatively peaceful society around you. My name is Diana, as Zane has mentioned, and it's my privilege to be moderating today's webinar. And it's a real joy to be able to introduce you to a very dear friend and colleague, Aida Vežic. Aida is the Secretary General of the Balkan Museum Network, which is based in Sarajevo in Bosnia and Herzegovina. The Balkan Museum Network, she will explain what that means. But when we're talking about the Balkan region, the main focus is on the former Yugoslavian countries and that sort of the kind of area of Southwest Europe. Aida has completed degrees in the Faculty of Economics and also a master's degree in cultural projects for development. She works tirelessly in sometimes extremely challenging conditions, helping to grow civil societies. She works as a consultant, as a facilitator, as a researcher, and as a trainer. Her work is at the moment mainly focused on cross-border working, so international collaboration, particularly within the context of her own region, which, as many of us will know, is a volatile area, is not an area that is known for its peace and harmony necessarily, but is also a beautiful wonderful part of the world, which much of my heart lies in the Western Balkans. She focuses on culture, on heritage, on peace building and philanthropy. But Aida is an extraordinary person. She won't, we have a saying in English, blowing your own trumpet. She won't do that. So I'm going to do that for her and say that it is a real great pleasure. We're deeply honoured to have you with us this morning, Aida, and welcome to the webinar.
Thank you very much for this kind welcome words, and I'm also so thrilled to present the work of the Balkan Museum Network that was initiated and started by Dr. Diana Walters, my friend and mentor for 6 years, closely working, but a lifetime of friendship. So I really look forward also to our discussions after the presentation. And yes, I wish you a good day from a bit cloudy Sarajevo, November. But as Diana said, it's a region full of potential and a region which is really, having these multi-layers that we can offer in terms of heritage, culture, arts, and all the different sociological, historical aspects of life. It's also an honor to present such a huge idea as Balkan Museum Network. And the presentation is titled Peace Building Through Museums, because we are working with promoting culture heritage, but what happens is a genuine human connection and a genuine actually peace building process that is connecting our colleagues from all over the Southeast Europe. And we are now in 13 countries, but let's just see how all of this has started. As you can imagine, after the conflict in the 90s in Croatia, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Kosovo, North Macedonia, the region was really, really full of mistrust, unprocessed war crimes, deeply ruined, deeply in ruins, impoverished, and the colleagues from the museum and heritage sector have lost all the contact. They have found themselves on opposite sides, and they were really craving for what was before the 90s in ex-Yugoslavia, which was a lot of professional mutual collaboration. So in this kind of region, which was immediately after the peace agreements and in the new border settings, with new governments and ex-military still in power, it was very optimistic, idealistic, and seemed impossible to talk about cross-border collaboration. How do you collaborate with former enemies, and how do you feel safe to express your own identity, which is shown through all the images in your culture, in your upbringing, in your education? So it was very hopeful in a post-conflict region to actually work about healing through mutual work. On the photo on this slide, you see National Museum of Bosnia and Herzegovina, which is actually the subject of a solidarity from Swedish colleagues who in 2006, under the Swedish organization Culture Heritage Without Borders, started the program on regional museum collaboration. There was so much destruction of culture heritage. As you can imagine, the war targets were all the landmarks of identity. So when architects started with rebuilding what was destroyed, it was inevitable to start also working with museum artifacts, but also with intangible heritage, which is so intertwined in terms of customs, traditions, religious expressions. So this building that you are looking at the slide was on the front line. This is a building which was built to be a museum. It's a huge complex, and today the museum holds 3 million objects and is still in very challenging position in terms of its acceptance and for its social role, cultural role, and appreciation of all the wealth that is being kept in the storages and depots of the National Museum. So Swedish colleagues took all their all their computers, equipment. They called and asked, "How can we help? What do you need us to bring?" So this act of solidarity and empathy meant so much that imagine living in a city under siege for more than 1,500 days, and you get this generous act of solidarity when colleagues come and they want to do something, change the situation, help you in your work, jointly promote and protect the rich cultural heritage of Bosnia and Herzegovina. When you enter the museum, now on the left on the wall, there is still a plaque dedicated to cultural heritage without borders, as a symbol of this act of solidarity between the colleagues. And then when the opportunity to meet was created through this regional museum program, colleagues were so happy. There was so much crying and hugs, and they decided that they would like to do something together that will change the image of the Balkans as a ruined, war-torn region. And they decided to create this shared cultural space and to create like a shared product. And it was quite ambitious. It was planned as 11 simultaneous exhibitions, but also as a traveling exhibition. And this traveling bus was such a symbolic gesture that actually the exhibition is crossing the borders and going from institution to institution, from colleague to a colleague. The topic of the exhibition would be, and from a small publication that I'm providing here, the cover pages on this slide and the publications you can find on the website of the Balkan Museum Network. It's a catalog of the traveling simultaneous exhibition 1+1 Life and Love. The logo is also very symbolic. It was designed by colleague Fatmir Juka from Albania. But in the introduction, there is a very atmospheric description how the idea was born, and the text is written by Dr. Diana Walters. It says, "One afternoon in March 2009, a group of people from 6 Balkan countries sat in a cold room in the National Museum in Sarajevo. The subject under discussion was how to produce a joint exhibition. The problem seemed huge. Political division and disagreement meant that it was sometimes difficult for some museums to work together. Traveling across border was not easy for people or objects. At the same time, the conversation was littered with connection from the past and the present." And this description could as well be written in 2025. The museum rooms are still cold, and there is still political division and disagreement, and there is still a lack of sufficient collaboration and mobility of our colleagues. I hope I have sparked your interest to continue reading this quote in the catalog of the exhibition. So, this is just 2 photos, but there are many that you can look into about this exhibition from these 11 museums. So I would also invite you to stroll through these photo albums in the social media of the Balkan Museum Network. But for example, this kind of craft you can find in all the countries. So all this women, usually it's women-centered handcraft of sewing, weaving, knitting, and all this heritage that today is a source of wealth for many of these women who are left without a job and without a income base. We started from 11, but today we are 400 members. In 20 years, there was a really more and more connection and more need expressed for the existence of Balkan Museum Network. On the national levels in the countries, there are some umbrella museum organizations such as museum societies and national icon committees, But what is different for the Balkan Museum Network is that we don't come with a recipe. We ask our members, what are the topics you want to discuss? What are the needs that you have? What would you like to learn? So everyone is welcome on capacity building activities, regardless if you're a volunteer or a top manager or a minister of culture. So that's why we define it as grassroots, peer-to-peer, and human-centered safe space for solidarity and support. In May 2025, we had a conference in the City Museum Zagreb, and in the last sharing session, the words that were expressed by colleagues is that at this conference, I felt seen, I felt heard, I was safe. I was really feeling safe to express my opinion, and everyone felt this really great atmosphere of support, which is so rare in some of the competitive environments in which you have colleagues from the same field. And membership is free, so everyone who abides to the values and who respects mission, vision, and the statute is welcome to join. Mostly it's individuals, but as you can imagine, it's much harder for institutions to decide to join. But regardless of this large number, it is still a political act to want to join and to join Balkan Museum Network. It is a political statement that you are for regional collaborations. It means that you appreciate the shared heritage, that you appreciate collaboration with colleagues from another countries, because the cultural policies in each of the 13 countries, which are currently not just ex-Yugoslavia, but also Greece, Bulgaria, Romania, and other countries of Southeast Europe, the cultural policies are very much different. So governance in culture is regulated by different laws, legal frameworks, related to all aspects of functioning of one museum institution. And at the very beginning, since this session is also dedicated to language, we said that English will be official language of the network because we have, at least 10 languages in the network. But this sometimes has created barriers, especially for older senior colleagues who don't feel comfortable in learning in English, who don't feel comfortable in expressing, the issues that they're feeling, that they are dealing with on a daily basis. And also words are divisive words. So we see in our region a lot of dissonant heritage, a lot of unspoken periods of history, such as, anti-fascism. After the World War II, there was a whole mushrooming of museums of revolution who are now neglected and who transformed into historical museums, but still keeping such an important value of today, which is anti-fascism as so we do talk in our activity in which history is contested. How do you bring three strategic objectives that we want to change the museums in the Balkans, to open them up, to enable partnerships with non-museum partners, with activists, schools, NGOs, associations of disabled people, by supporting middle managers as leaders in their professions, but also advocating for socially responsible museums, encouraging museums to talk about all the social issues within their local communities, regardless of which community this topic is most affecting. But we are also always aware that this, as I said, cross-border is a political, and cross-border means a reconciliation and peace building. So these, for example, strategic objectives were set 10 years ago, but they are still valid today in 2025, because we see that it's very easy to have political influence on museums by appointing directors. We see that it's very easy to limit the role of museums by saying, oh, you are only to deal with cultural topics. Like why would a museum have an exhibition about migrant crisis or about migrant route in the Balkans, or why would the museum talk about the social treatment of disabled people? But that's why we say it's a social responsibility of museum to talk about all these issues and not to be neutral, but to have a stand. It's always important to echo these values, that museums are places for dialogue, that use heritage to promote diversity. In our activities, we did celebrate all individuals by promoting multiplicity of voices, multiplicity of perspectives in heritage interpretation, but also in designing for all audience members, being an institution which is open to all, because museums believe that they have a positive change also on peace building in the Balkans. We believe that museums and heritage are for all, and we believe that the power of museums to help build democratic societies, which is very important in all the world, but especially in the region that we are having our members. So museums to help build democratic societies, to work for social justice, and to promote sustainable cultural and economic development. These are our 4 core values. There are many issues that currently museum as an institution and museum workers are facing with. I just highlighted 3 of the top issues, which are always going to be priority, and how we are also coping with them. For example, the first issue is the lack of funding, but especially funding for programs for research. On this photo that was taken in October in the National Museum of Bosnia and Herzegovina, you can see the results of the research work conducted by the conservator and the museum deputy director Azra Birčić-Šarenkapa, because through Balkan Museum Network, our members can be part of European research projects funded by Horizon, and they can explore new tools and technologies of doing their work. But there is inherent lack of appreciation for the work done by museums, and so that there's an inherent lack of funding, which means, public funding, but also private funding. We are always saying that museums are slow to change, so there is definitely an internal organizational culture which is hierarchical. On the photo, you see a young person, and that's something that we are noticing on our conferences in the last several years, is that more and more young museum professionals are entering the labor market, entering the institutions, and they're becoming curators, educators, and want mentoring opportunities. They need the opportunity for professional development and learning, but also for collaboration with colleagues that have different experiences and that can transfer their, all the life lessons to new generations. But definitely internal organizational culture is still influencing motivation, liberty to propose ideas, etc. So I put it as one of the issues that the museum professionals are dealing today. And definitely there's a lot of pressure on new skills. So now in the digital age, museum workers, museum educators, and guides and curators should have digital skills. They should, be aware of how museums is influencing well-being and mental health. Have a mediator skills to work with different audiences. So there's a lot of pressure, and also we see these like new job titles, and new skills are a constant a need, a constant professional development and lifelong learning. On the photo is a recent activity that was taking place in the Art Gallery of Bosnia and Herzegovina, in which disabled people are discovering cultural heritage through audio, but also through touch of the tactile objects. We are in 2025, we have countries which are members of the European Union in our network, but still 2/3 of the respondents in May this year, when we asked them how they would rate regional collaboration, said that it's very low, low and moderate. And this is alarming, that regional collaboration is still on such a very low level happening in our region. One of the respondents said that when we talk about regional collaboration, it's predominantly occurring between colleagues, not formally through institutional channels. So these, MOUs are having a symbolic function, but true connection happens person to person and from a colleague to a colleague. I have covered these problems with internal organizational structure. Then I also want to emphasize always that why we constantly do trainings, workshops, capacity building, why we are a platform that offers consultancy, professional development, is to support the staff. Because the staff is having a hesitance to be engaged in the research and experimental work, and has a limited time to pursue new ideas and new initiatives. In these 20 years, we had so many results behind us. What we are really proud of is our permanent working group. It's called the Balkan Museum Access Group, and it was awarded by the Zero Award in 2018 for innovative practice. It's basically a structure of museum colleagues that understand the problems you are dealing with as a museum professional, and that can guide you step by step, how to first see the barriers, because maybe if we sometimes see the physical barriers, we don't see sensory, intellectual, economic, and any other barriers. And these are the colleagues that together with the institution work on a plan of prioritizing the removal of the barriers in some sort of one-to-one consultancy process. We also managed to have 9 international museum conferences with more than 500 participants and so many topics on these conferences. For example, this year we discussed what does it mean emotional museum, and how should the curators work with sensitive topics, what are the gender issues in museums, what is 3D scanning, interpretation of museums, designing exhibitions, etc., etc. You can see the full program and a conference brochure on the website of the Balkan Museum Network. We also specifically focus on access and inclusion, thanks to Dr. Diana Walters. That's really our recognizable trait that we are having access as a key value. So we had also 2 international conferences, 2 Balkan Museums Without Barriers, to celebrate good practices and to continue learning in this regard. We have 28 publications, but we also highlight the good work done around souvenirs, because we think that this is a great crossroad between crafts, collections, intangible, but also strengthening, thinking outside of the box for museums. So we awarded the 3 years souvenir award. We also awarded the Museum Peace Broker Award in 24 and 25 to highlight the good work done by colleagues who are brokering, reconnecting the ties that were broken in the region. Thanks to our honorary member and the initiative Diana Walters. We had more than 100 capacity building activities. Only this year we had more than 10 webinars. So you can find the recordings of all the webinars on our YouTube channel. And what I'm really proud of is this bilateral collaboration, because imagine having 400 members. What we are really managing to do with creation of safe space is to spark bilateral collaboration, and it's And it's shown in mutual visits, in joint work, in joint exhibitions, in joint partnering in the project, but in just joint support. When you have a question that you don't know the answer to, you know whom to call. So this is really a social capital and a huge wealth that our members have. We are also encouraging museums to directly be partners in the EU-funded projects. Long term, this will bring more diversity in funding, more independence, more administrative capacity. And as association, we are members, we are partners in 3 Erasmus, 2 Horizon Euro projects, and are really happy when we can have new funding partners. What is Balkan Museum Network doing also is giving grants through the Headley Southeast European Culture Heritage Fund. But this has started through Culture Heritage Without Borders in 2010, when the museums were encouraged to internalize project-based thinking, to think, in problem-solving ways. So now in our portfolio, there is more than 60 small museum projects, and currently 13 are running, funded by the Headley Southeast European Fund. And we hope that this is a good basis for continued collaboration with the Headley Trust in the years to come. But what is this granting process? I mean, Balkan Museum Network is a capacity building platform. We are not a donor, but the projects are arena for testing, for innovating, for building new strategic long-term partnerships. And these are some of the quotes from the grantees who said that this Hadley call is supporting experimentation, youth engagement, and fresh approach. And this is really the essence, to allow the space for innovation, to allow the space for research to happen. Another grantee said that highlight that each applicant, which is a museum or NGO, should highlight their vision, strength, and embrace collaboration and take the leap. One of the criteria is partnership. So every project has a component of partnership embedded in this project. And two more quotes just saying that this fund is not just about financial support, it's about capacity building, learning, and connecting with others across the region who face similar challenges. I think this quote is really also summarizing the essence of the Balkan Museum Network. We are really proud that we democratize knowledge exchange and capacity building, because all our conferences have co-created programs. So we have an open call for members to propose a workshop. We don't come with a ready-made program, but we work from practices which are on the ground. So there is really strength in co-creation of the content. Members are not appointed by a director or by a minister. They are directly applying, which is still disruptive. So still we have cases in which a person who is eager to learn cannot do the participation at the conference as a part of their job, but they have to take a vacation to be able to take part at the conference or training, which is sad truth in terms of how learning is not supported by institutions, but there is a strong need with individuals. As I said, museums are directly involved in the project implementation. They directly get some equipment. In 2025, Balkan Museum Network donated 2 batches of equipment to Homeland Museum in Knjaževac and National Museum of Bosnia and Herzegovina. Also, we are strongly encouraging documentation. So that's why often we do these webinars or publications, and there is a really open call for grant giving. In 2025, we received 86 applications for the Headley Trust, among which 8 were funded. I would like to highlight that this opportunity for a museum to go through the process of surveying your access infrastructure capabilities in doing an access survey is open invitation, and that the members of our Balkan Museum Access Group are actually like our beacons who are transmitting this value and knowledge. On this slide, you see 4 profile photos of museum professionals. These are Dr. Irena Ruzin from North Macedonia, Leila Agic from Bosnia and Herzegovina, Željka Sušić from Croatia, and Milena Milošević-Micić from Serbia, who are tirelessly supporting their colleagues to embed access as a core institutional value, as a respect for human rights, because museums are duty bearers. They have the obligation to respect the rights of disabled people. And all our work is based on a social model of inclusion, which is actually saying that we should modify the environment and be open to all. I also invite you to browse through the database of publications on our website. We have the recent one called From Risk to Response, dealing with illicit trafficking of cultural goods. Also, there are some collections of best practices related to inclusion. You have Accessible Balkan Museums, which is a catalog of accessible museum services, also available as a clickable map. So you can go to the website accessiblebmuseums.net and explore, each of these pins is a museum institution, and you can see what sort of activities and what sort of facilities and infrastructure they are offering to different audiences to be accessible for all. 1 month ago, we also took part in the creation of this map of existing critical history tours. It's a result of one Erasmus project. So the project is funded by the European Union. And in the Balkan region, there are several identified tours, which are, talking, for example, in Bosnia and Herzegovina, there's a Srebrenica Memorial. There is a tour about Yugoslavia that you can, take with the guide and explore one historical aspect or a period. But as you can see, the map is covering the whole Europe from Portugal to Finland. What we do is countercultural resilience, because mainstream culture is not for regional museum collaboration. So the network in the 20 years is thriving despite political division. Political division is still very much prominent in the daily lives of citizens. And we show this example by collaboration and solidarity, because members of the network believe museums can be agents for peace, so that there is an agency that you can actually change the local community by being a space for dialogue, for understanding, and for reconciliation. So we are happy, to continue to operate even in this volatile, not fixed, it's all project-based. There is only few persons who can dedicate their time for the development of this important platform for collaboration in the Balkans. Working across languages is always challenging. So, for example, we did translate some of the toolkits we had. There was a disability toolkit, and it's translated to Albanian, Serbian, Bosnian, and Macedonian, because we see that definition of a word also means changing awareness and approach. So we felt it was very important, if we really want to embed working with disability, that we offer these terms in all the languages, not all, but in Albanian, Bosnian, Serbian, Macedonian. And what is peace building today? I mean, we have so many issues that are constantly, in the focus by some happenings. For example, femicide, the role of women, and gender roles, but also about social cohesion in a society in which there is still a lot of emigration. So every year, people are leaving this region, going for the better life in European Union. There is so much need to talk about, LGBTIQ plus community through, dialogue, activities, exhibitions, but also about displaced persons, migrants, people on the move who are crossing the Balkans in their search for a better life in European Union. And so much economic inequality is happening after the change of the economic system, that the whole region from socialism is transforming to worst kinds of capitalism society. I would like also to highlight as my closing remarks this quote for the recipient of the 2024 Peace Broker Prize, Rima Rajanica from the War Childhood Museum in Sarajevo in Bosnia and Herzegovina. When we ask, how do you see museums dealing with the topic of peace in the future? She said that museums must be unwavering in their values, open, trustworthy, and safe spaces where we can embrace shared heritage as our own. And there is so much work behind every of these words. What does it mean to be open? How do you maintain to be trustworthy? And how you are a safe space for all your audience members. Some of our work is described in the chapter of this book, edited by Diana Walters, Daniel Levin, and Peter Davis. It's Heritage and Peace Building. It was published several years ago, so please check it out, because there are many other interesting examples, not just the work of the Balkan Museum Network. And I hope you will reach out. So check out our website, our social media, and do write an email if you have a question, suggestion, if you're looking for partners, because we have such an amazing institutions and individuals in our network and all our region. Thank you for your attention.
Oh, thank you so much, Aida, for that really inspiring, wonderful presentation that took us on a massive journey there across the Balkan region. I'm going to invite Henry, my colleague, to come and join us on the screen. And I'm also going to invite anybody who is watching the webinar, inspired with a question, or would like to raise a point or an example or whatever, please do put your questions and comments and observations into the chat function, because it would be lovely to have as many voices as possible joining in our conversation at this point in the process. We have some questions already, Aida, for you, but before I go to those, Henry, can I just put you on the spot? And what is your immediate response to that inspiring presentation we've just had?
Yes, thanks, Diana, and thank you so much, Aida, for the fantastic presentation. It was really very interesting, and because I work with sustainable development, so much of what you spoke about sounded very much like the work of sustainable development to me. That I love this idea of the Balkan Museums Network as the hopeful idea, because my sort of personal view is that's where these things start, with a good idea, with an idea that is inviting, that is not fixed, that allows people to bring themselves and their own concerns and hopes and values to that. That's wonderful. And I think also to say that when we talk about sustainable development, it's a forward-facing activity. Of course, that's not to say that we are just kind of naive about the past, or we just try to ignore, or just block out the past. We build on it, we learn from it, and we draw from it, and we change in a progressive way. You did mention something about how museums can be slow to change. I think personally, I see that some museums can be actually very fast to change, but unfortunately they're often the very small ones with very little resources. But we can say that the museum sector can be very slow to change, and unfortunately the big museums can be slow to change as well, because they're like a kind of super tanker. It's just hard to shift their direction. You mentioned about the work of doing a joint exhibition, and we'd heard that last week as well, how a project, you know, that brings people together, they create something new together, can be you know, you kind of use the museum, the work of museums or the museum model to kind of bring things together. And I did like very much some of what you talked about as the role or the place of culture, because culture means so many different things to different people. And in a way, that wide varieties of meaning gives a space. You know, if we say culture is exactly this thing and it's this very precise thing, that's quite exclusive. You know, it's like, well, what does culture mean to you? And if we can acknowledge that culture in itself is neither kind of good or bad, it's a kind of tool, or it's a space. It's what we do with that space that really puts it to work. And so I liked very much what you talked about, how we focus on the positive aspects, you know, about solidarity and tolerance and diversity, speaking to people's reality, to living in the real world, rather than a very closed view of what culture is, like you know, like identity or something like this. And this idea that, you know, your network, you build it together, people build it together, that it's open enough that it gives a structure for people to know what's coming, but it also is very supportive in terms of helping provide resources, helping provide direction. But I think particularly in challenging times or in difficult situations or potentially difficult situations, a strong focus on principles is so important. And also the focus on principles that I heard about values, about working together, about trust, about solidarity, about not providing answers, but, you know, creating this kind of, you know, a space that can continue over such a long time is really amazing, because it can be quite easy to start things, but it's much harder to keep them going. And so the fact your network has still continues to thrive and to grow and to benefit is wonderful. And just a few final comments. You spoke a bit about some of the challenges that the sector faces about declines in public funding, project-based short-term approaches, and the kind of almost like a kind of runaway train feeling about how people they feel they're often just never quite doing the right thing. You constantly need new skills without always looking after the old skills at the same time. So I think helping people hold on to, well, what are the important things rather than what is the very fast current thing. That's really, really important. And I love this idea about being open and trustworthy, because, I mean, as a kind of personal view, museum people often like to say that museums are trusted. And the feeling I often have is they're trusted by the people who use them and very irrelevant to the people who don't. And so if we really want to be trusted and trustworthy, it means we need to not assume that we're always doing wonderful things, but to really listen to people, look at who is at the table and who is left out, and recognize that they have an equal place at the table as everyone else. And because trust is something that has to be deserved, it has to be earned, and once it's lost, it can be very hard to rebuild. But it also must not be assumed. And so I think it's just great to hear, you know, your very diverse experiences there, but very much focused on a kind of bottom up, but with the creating the enabling environment. So I think that's where I'll end. But yeah, thank you very much, Aida.
Thank you, Henry. Aida, would you like to respond to anything that Henry has highlighted there?
I would like to thank for these wonderful and kind words, and just to emphasize that it's not easy, that it's a struggle. I mean, we constantly have colleagues who are worried because of the change of management, and they are not certain if they can continue their work. We have so a person is either retired, sorry, there's a new politically appointed director, but there's a lot of uncertainty about like what will new cultural policy be when a manager is changing. There's a lot of uncertainty in how stable the region is. We continue talking about potential EU membership, but also potential new conflicts. So I remember 2 years ago there was quite a paranoia that there will be a new war in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and that people were just questioning, is this a reality? Like, is this something that could really happen? But this fear is sparked by media, now inflation, rising costs of life, also geopolitical instability, because as being a candidate countries, we are not part of the EU, but we are kind of a buffer zone between different political influences. So you can imagine that colleagues who are completely in love with their collections and who really just want to do exhibitions, but are constantly burdened by thinking about their personal health, personal finances, job security, and general security in the country. So I would also like to highlight that all these results are a struggle of an amazing group of people.
Yeah, I really, really want to underline that. I think that the level of dedication and the level of risk, actually, personal and professional risk, that people take when they become activists in the Balkan Museum network. And actually that links directly to a question, Aida, that has come in from a participant, a very direct question. Have you or your colleagues or members of the network faced any political pressures because of your activities?
Yes, after the participation in a regional activity, a colleague might be summoned to report, who was there, what they were talking about, highlighting special issues. So in our pre-conference survey this year, there was a question about independence of museums. And we were quite surprised that not a lot of colleagues highlighted this as an issue, because we think there's a lot of self-censorship, that unlike the colleagues in European Union who are even free to talk about, hey, we are not independent, in our region, there's not even freedom to open up the debate about independence in working on museums. So I would say, unfortunately, yes. Not me personally, but I mean colleagues, because I have a privilege to be association, but our members are public institutions. So there is a difference in this, legal status.
Absolutely, absolutely, yes, and that's often a tension, isn't it? But it doesn't. I mean, extraordinary that it doesn't seem to have affected the fact that the network is growing from strength to strength to strength. Your increase in membership and diversity, all these different countries coming in. I mean, why do you think people are so drawn to the kind of example that the platform is setting? What is it that brings people gravitating, albeit slowly and individually, but what is it that brings people gravitating towards your messages of hope, do you think?
Well, I think it resonates to personal values. So people who are joining are already seeing the value in shared heritage, and they see enrichment in collaborating with colleagues. Because when you invite an exhibition from another museum and you're proudly opening this exhibition from another country, but you're also, connecting it to your own past and identity. So I think partly it's opportunities for enriching your life. It's just any Erasmus, like any mobility, you meet so many friends and you meet so many, like-minded individuals. But it's also opportunities. For example, with small grants, imagine receiving 4,000 euros just for 6 months of activities. But we now have museums who, for 10 years, continue collaborating with these associations because they now have a strategic partnership. They have recognized each other as natural partners. And so it's sparking. The network is like a lighter going around and doing just this and hoping that little fires will start in terms of long-term partnership.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you. One thing I'd like to pick up, if it's okay with you, is this issue, because language and communication is something we wanted to have a little sort of a little bit of focus on. And I noticed that during your presentation, Aida, you used lots of different words, lots of different terms for the processes that we're thinking about today. You talked about healing, you talked about reconciliation, you talked about peace building, tolerance, and so on. I mean, there's so many different words for these processes, but I'm very aware that that a lot of these terms are quite loaded. They're quite problematic, aren't they? Even the use of the word peace and peace building. Even a lot of institutions working with peace now prefer to talk about non-violence or safer societies or so on. What's your feeling around the different words and the kind of the connotations and issues that they hold? Do you have a view on that at all?
In ex-Yugoslavia, people do not like to talk about reconciliation and peace building, and that's why the initial strategy was let's not talk about this, but like create opportunities. Let's talk about objects, and through having objects in the center, we are doing peace building. So we don't have to name what we are doing, but we care for culture heritage, we promote it, we preserve it, we invite the interpretation of it without actually saying what are we doing here as a group of institutions or individuals. So the terms are loaded and people are tired of these words. They seem to be worn out. Like even in literature, in film industry, you hear comments that people are like, oh, again something about the war. Don't we have something about science and STEM and future and robotics and AI? So people would rather discuss these digital transformations and AI than peace building. But then you go and you turn on the radio and you hear so many stories about how societies are still divided, how people still are mistreated in different geographic areas. So even if we don't like to call it that way, we need to be doing that work, but indirectly through, focusing on what we do. We say we promote cultural heritage. We don't have to say we do peace building, but basically what we are doing is also peace building.
Yes, that's fantastically interesting and really helpful, and it relates again to one of another question that has come through from a colleague who's listening. I think you've kind of answered this, but just to really kind of focus it and bring it home, the question is, how do you link accessibility to peace? The questioner says intuitively they seem to be connected, but how do you put that into words? I think you've kind of sort of touched on that, haven't you?
Yeah, and it's also that in our region we have the percentage of disabled people higher than in the rest of the Europe as a consequence of war. So the disabilities are a direct consequence of war activities. But and also, I mean, today we have a lot of work around veterans, PTSD, or female soldiers. So there are associations and groups of these, let's say, not interest groups, but like communities of people who share something. So I would connect peace building to just saying that for us, accessibility means being museum for all. And being museum for all, it means that someone who will enter your door might have opposing views on the exhibition or on even the value of culture heritage institution, because in unstable cultural policies, there is still a lot of question like who should be the guardian of this heritage, like who does it belong to, and then it's connected to funding, to governance, and also to political influence. So for us, accessibility is peace building.
I think that's a wonderful perspective. I really do. And I think that's what you've illustrated there is the power of working trust. Henry was talking about trust and reflecting on that a moment ago. And of course, there are different types of trust and different ways of achieving trust, particularly when we've had ongoing political divisions and identity politics and so on and so forth, and all this contested heritage, that if you can find these areas, these platforms, these issues that are universal, like accessibility, like gender equality, like anti-discriminatory practices, they kind of cut across in a different way, don't they? And allow people to come together, working towards an objective, working towards a goal. And I do remember, Aida, thank you for highlighting the 1+1 project, which it was my great joy to be involved in that particular initiative. And one of the things that I remember that process revealing over time was this kind of subversive humor, which is actually something I would really, really, I'm smiling already because whenever I think of the Western Balkan region, I just think of the depth of humor, that kind of dark, resilient humor that just will not be trodden down, and how during the course of that project, these kind of links became so transformative, actually, to the extent that we kind of hid sort of little messages in the exhibitions. There were little sort of clues around sort of subversive collaboration. Probably I shouldn't be saying this, but it's a long time ago now, so I think it's probably safe to talk about it. But even the logo, the idea of the two people sort of pointing upwards and looking at the stars, was a hopeful representation of, like, okay, at the moment when we were doing that project, people from Serbia and Kosovo could not cross each other's bound. They could not be in the other country. It just was not safe to do so. But there was still, through this project, there was this sense of we don't see that boundary. We do not see that. We do not recognize that border. We are colleagues. We are working together. We have a joint project and we support each other. So powerful. And as we look at the state of Europe today, wider Europe, former Soviet Union, all the different, things that are looking horribly familiar in lots of ways. What would you say to our colleagues who are currently working in those conditions? What would your message be in terms of sustainability and resilience and digging deep and keeping that hope alive?
Yeah, we have evidence that museums increase welfare, well-being, mental health. So even in very hard conditions, colleagues from Sarajevo who were under siege but were taking care of their objects, and or we're also, now documenting these experiences. These are now very important. So I have colleagues, I'm sure that they have the passion to persevere, to sustain, to keep doing what they're doing, because all this documentation work, but also this hope that culture is a human value that has nothing to do with national identity, with ethnic groups, with religious groups, but a pure expression of what it means to be human, a human who cares for life, who cares for beauty, who cares for potential. So I would say that even in hopeless situations, just try to keep your own health in terms of being strong so you can help others, so help yourself to help others, and don't be shy to talk also about the condition of cultural workers. Speaking about jokes, we are always joking about these like unions, trade unions, that we really need to advocate more about the mental health of the cultural workers. Because if, for example, for 5 years you are dealing with such a difficult subject and you're working with these stories, you internalize all this pain and suffering. It stays in your body. But also, just physically, what are the conditions in terms of, heat or cold or level of appreciation and amount of your salary. So it's hard, but it's rewarding, and that's why we recognize guardians of culture heritage as sort of heroes, of people who really kept the link between past and the future.
Well, thank you, Aida. I mean, I hope you don't mind me sharing this, but I know that you yourself, as a young person, went through the siege in your own city. You were besieged, as it were, for almost 4 years. A tremendous hardship. And I think one of the things that I've always been so, I don't know, I was going to say, and I don't know what the word is actually, but you don't have any bitterness. How is that possible? How is it? How is that possible? Have you had to work at that, or I mean, your positivity, your sense of hope, and this is replicated across the region. I mean, I'm talking about you at the moment, but I'm inspired by this over and over and over again.
Also, today I work with colleagues who love their job, and when you are surrounded with people who really truly love their work, you are so enriched, and so working with speaking about the siege, I always remember all the films we saw, because I was such an avid movie goer, even among snipers, shells. I would go to see my, films, because there was initiative from Italian embassy, Spanish embassy, different cultural initiatives to promote European cultures. So for me, it's also fun memories. I mean, memories of connecting with people. And while you are like 5 hours waiting for a loaf of bread, you just connect to people on so many levels.
I don't have any words for this, really. It humbles me totally. So at this point, I'm going to pass back to Henry. Henry, do you have any more questions or points, or anything that has our little conversation has sparked off for you?
Yes, I mean, I think the question I would ask is that there can be a big assumption that the Balkans is a kind of troubled region. Western Europe is the, democratic, peaceful, safe, and all of these things. And I wondered if you have anything to say about how there's a diversity in all of these regions, that we see challenges in all places. And I wonder if you have any thoughts or views on some of the challenges we see, not just in the Balkans, but in other places. Do you see similarities or differences or alarming signs, or if I can put it that way?
We should really learn from the past, and we should really use lessons from the Balkans for today and the future. And similarities is, of course, also the language used, that we are normalizing extreme violent language. And when you start normalizing this, it's really inciting hatred and division. So in terms of integration, the things will be just more complicated. We will not have easier context. So our context will increase in their complexity. So alarming signs, of course, are the loss of democratic freedom. I mean, the loss for peaceful protest, for freedom of speech. I mean, it's just like 20 lessons for tyranny. We should really look into, how things quickly can escalate, because in 91 everyone was saying there will never be war. No, we are so multicultural, we are all so friends and intertwined, but there was a war. So you can never with certainty say that you have stability, because the things really change overnight. And I'm particularly worried about decreasing funds for culture and increasing funds for defense and security, and which shows our priority, what we are valuing on a policy level. So we should really use the lessons from the Balkans and analyze and see what we did wrong and how we should quickly react to signs of extremism now throughout the world.
Yeah, thank you, Aida.
So I have one final question, Aida, if I may, for you, which has again come through from a participant. They write, "Thank you so much for sharing this wonderfully impressive work of the network. You referenced principles of peace and reconciliation in the strategy. And the question is, how did you agree on those? What was the process in terms of actually agreeing those principles? Would it be possible for you to just put that in a nutshell for us?"
We have a structure in the network which are members of our steering board, and they know about national cultural policies. So principles of peace are that we should be monitoring the situation and be updated about what is happening, and be aware of different tendencies, initiatives, legal changes, threats to culture heritage, some investment ideas to destroy medieval fortress and build a hotel. Or so we do it by having envoys, ambassadors, beacons, professionals which are working in different countries, in different institutions, who volunteer their expertise and time as making a structure of the Balkan Museum Network. So within our structure, we have this steering board. But we don't define principles as, something that you would print and put on your wall and have a checklist. For us, it's just sticking to our values, and I think it's very important to have your decision making value driven. So if this is in line with our values, we say yes. If it's not, then we say no to the partnership and no to the project or a specific person or organization. So I would say communication and dialogue. Like we often have these 9 p.m. meetings in which we just talk as friends, but also as professionals about briefing each other what is happening in the sector.
Oh, that's so inspiring. Thank you so much. Henry, just a couple of last words from you before I close, if that's okay.
Sure. I think thanks, Diana, and thanks again, Aida. I mean, I think we've heard a wonderful example today of how, from basically smart, committed people with a good idea that invites other people in, that's how we change the world. And none of us can do it on our own, but it's amazing what we can do together. And I mean, all credit to you, Aida. It's wonderful to hear, and it's wonderful to hear that it continues to grow in a very, very positive way. It provides such meaning to lots of people and colleagues, and how you build the future and the sector together. So good luck to you, I say. So thank you.
Yes, voila, Aida. Just so wonderful to hear from you. I'm going to actually read a comment that's also come through from a participant as a way of kind of summarizing a little bit, I think, what a lot of us will be feeling. Thank you for the presentation. I agree that openness to new, innovative ideas, creative approaches, experimentation, and the courage to make mistakes are essential in peace promotion activities and the work of memory institutions in general. I think, this is the person writing, I think that libraries and museums still have a lot to learn. I personally feel we have learned so much from you today. Thank you so much for your generosity in sharing so honestly and openly, because it's so helpful when we really get a true picture. Please send our greetings to all the members of the Balkan Museum Network, and I encourage anybody listening to this webinar, reach out to AIDA, reach out to the Balkan Museum Network, because this is a platform that maybe could work for you, maybe could be replicated, even if you're in a really volatile situation, if it's a very, the fact that we have these things, these values, these beliefs, these things that you can continue to keep us together, that has to be the way that we move forward towards building a non-violent society. So bless you, thank you so much. Just a reminder before we go, there are 4 webinars in this series, so you can access all of these. They will be published on the YouTube page of the Latvian Museums Association very shortly. So do please revisit them, continue to comment, continue to reach out to anybody that you would like to speak to as a result of these really inspiring webinars. And it comes my great pleasure to thank everybody, and there are many people involved in organising these events. It's quite some undertaking. Huge thanks to everybody, all our speakers, participants, the people behind the scenes, Inga, of course, and Zane from Latvia. Thank you for this absolutely beautiful project that we've journeyed through together. Please stay well. Listen to AIDA and put your own mask on first. Make sure there's some self-care as we move forward into these darker days of winter. Thank you so much for joining us.